In a world filled with killers of all sorts, it was kind of hard narrowing this list down to just 10 people. And we know that some of the names here might not be the ones you want to see, but such is the nature of internet discussions, isn't it? Invincible has a ton of great characters, and one of its most intriguing aspects is the concept of taking a life. Some do their best to avoid taking a life at all costs. Others just couldn't care less about crushing a few ants underneath their boots. In this video, we will take a look at people from the latter category, and spoiler warning, because some of these guys have not shown up yet. So without further ado, these are the 10 most unhinged and bloodthirsty killers in the Invincible universe, explored. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Omni-Man. He might have reformed himself ever since he realized he truly loves his family members, but when he was introduced, Omni-Man was a stone-cold killer, and in most of the larger multiverse, he stays that way. Nolan was one of the most decorated Viltrumite officers in history, which, while it sounds nice on paper, means that he was involved in several campaigns of genocide. One attack that the series highlights in particular is his leadership of the attack on the Unipan home world, which forced Alan the alien's ancestors to become a migrating species. In the comics, you get a brief look at Nolan flying above the Unipans as his soldiers decimate their world in issue 11, but the TV show gives us an extended version of the attack, and it is disturbing to say the least. When you take that and couple it with Nolan's casual slaughter of the Guardians of the Globe in the comics, and you come to realize just how many times he might have done this kind of thing. Once again, the TV series decided to extend this fight sequence for the sake of giving the Guardians a better showing, but in the comics, it was one-sided as hell. Nolan also looked rather unbothered about murdering all those Flaxans that came upon him and Mark in Season 1, and if he hadn't realized his feelings for his son and wife were real, he would have continued on that same path. In a way, much of Nolan's character arc after his abandonment of the Empire is an atonement for his past, because he has killed so many people that his hands stay red even with his gloves off, and he isn't the only person who ends up reforming his ways on this list. Darkwing 2. The original Darkwing was as close of an adaptation of Batman as you can get, without copying his design and backstory outright, but his successor was a lot better and a lot worse than him in so many ways. Darkwing 2 was better in that he could use the abilities of the Shadow Universe a lot more effectively and efficiently than his predecessor. He was a lot worse in that he allowed this power to corrupt him and turn him into a man who goes from killing for a cause to just killing. The animated series doesn't show us this, but before Mark meets Darkwing 2, the latter had just gotten done chasing down and killing an innocent woman from Midnight City for no reason. Apart from the fact that he enjoyed killing people, the look on his face, that maniacal, I will eat your heart look, is terrifying to say the least. And he's also deluded enough to think that he's doing some good for the world by quote-unquote stopping Invincible. We're just glad that Mark became as smart of a fighter as he was when he fought Darkwing, because he'd have been left for dead in the Shadow Universe. An evil variant of him is left for dead in there, but because it's a Mark, Darkwing has to go in with him to ensure he doesn't escape. This happens after the Knight of Midnight City has been reformed by Cecil, so he gets a hero's ending at the very least. But before that, the name Darkwing had become Scourge upon the very place it was sworn to defend, all because of the thrilling allure of bloody murder.
Listen, my name is General Krieg.
Craig. You might be shocked to see the Viltrumite general so low on our list, seeing as he probably executed so many of their destructive strategies personally. But Craig is another character who reforms himself, and in the end, proves to be a badass father of several children by a dozen women. Before that, however, Craig was one of the coldest Viltrumites in the series, and this is illustrated by his insistence to finish a mission, no matter how tough it is. Craig knew taking in Nolan wasn't going to be easy, especially with his half-breed son backing him up, but it was his duty to capture him, and besides, he wanted to know how one of their brightest turned into their second great betrayer. Craig and his Viltrumite buddies beat the crap out of Nolan and Mark, and only left the latter alive because his test of loyalty hadn't been conducted yet. But what proves Craig's ruthlessness is the fact that even Conquest gets nervous in his presence, and when push comes to shove, Craig isn't afraid to make his thoughts known to his leader. In the final stages of the Viltrumite War, Nolan and Mark are beat, and the Viltrumites have the conflict won, but their their leader belays them from killing the pair. He has a worse punishment in mind for them, and Craig says no to that. He wants to complete the mission right now, because treason shouldn't be tolerated for this long. We're glad he ends up assenting to his leader's plans, because that's what gets him started on the path to reforming. And despite becoming a better man, Craig is still a warrior at heart. He remains one of the foremost soldiers of the Empire, and has no problem slaughtering teenagers that are mad enough to oppose him in a war. So to put it all very simply, don't mess with Craig even when he's being nice, because there's a reason he's got a scouter for an eye. And speaking of scouters...
Rex, civilians in danger to your left.
Yeah, I got eyes too.
Robot. One of the most heartbreaking moments in all of Invincible is when Robot finally drops his mask of heroism and shows himself for the villain that he truly is. Rudy started his journey as a man dedicated to bringing justice to the world, but as he became smarter and smarter, he realized that he just wasn't human like his friends were. Rudy never felt emotions the same way, didn't understand them frankly, but he knew how they were supposed to be expressed. He cloned his friend Rex and transferred his consciousness into the clone because he loved Rex and wanted to honor his best friend in the best way possible to his mind. But then Rex died, and Rudy got stuck in the Flaxen dimension with Monster Girl for 7 centuries. He didn't physically age to reflect that number, but he did mentally. Because Amanda was his only other companion in that dimension, he became intimate with her. But his plans for becoming the Flaxen's ruler clashed with her independent personality, and eventually, she joined the resistance against his rule. Robot decided to leave the Flaxens when he saw that he'd lost Monster Girl in the ways that mattered. But before he did that, he commanded his soldiers to purge the rebel faction she was assisting, and kill the child she'd conceived with one of them in her monster form. He told Amanda to claim that they'd only been stuck for 12 years, because he was already working on a plan. That plan turned out to be his takeover of Earth, because Robot was convinced he could replicate his success with the Flaxens, and bring permanent peace to the world. But to do that, he kills Cecil and a bunch of other superheroes and villains, putting Earth under surveillance of his drones. Robot runs a brutal and oppressive regime which maintains peace on the exterior, but also kidnaps kids to use as bargaining chips in the future. By the end of his life, Robot is responsible for millions of deaths across 2 dimensions, and he doesn't care, because to him, at least it's something different from what has happened in the past. And the fact that difference was what he was basing this whole thing off of is nuts to us. So of course, Robot was going to be on this list. Angstrom Levy. Angstrom Levy is quite possibly the best written Invincible villain because he's just so layered and dynamic. He's a genius who has been driven insane by his own hand, but because he doesn't remember it, he blames it all on Invincible. The fact that Mark isn't good in most of the multiverse doesn't help, because many of Angstrom's variants have fought him, and it never ends well for them. Levy wanted to make the multiverse a better place when he came up with the idea to merge the minds of all his variants, but instead, he turned into a superpowered maniac with a single goal in life: killing Invincible. To that end, Angstrom has gone above and beyond to try and make Mark's life as miserable as he can before he finally gives him the sweet release of death. Every time Angstrom shows up, you can't help but feel afraid for Debbie, Oliver, and Eve, because you know he's crazy enough to use them to get to Mark. And let us not even get started on his idea of collateral damage. To Angstrom, as long as Invincible is suffering, no amount of death can dissuade him from his mission, and that's made painfully clear by his reaction to the aftermath of the Invincible War. Angstrom went from dimension to dimension, gathering up evil variants of his enemy to kill his enemy, and though he lost over half of them, he was happy to see they'd left Earth a smoking wasteland and ruined Mark's reputation. When they turned on him, Angstrom simply stranded them in the wasteland dimension, and he wouldn't drop by for a visit because he is a benevolent guy. His moment of reformation is a bit random and abrupt in the comics, but it doesn't save him from a terrible fate. Angstrom Levy dies with several dozen needles and prongs sticking out of his body, and his enemies try to pull his dimensional powers out of him. And though this feels like the wrong thing to say, we'll still say it. The guy deserved that ending. He killed so many people and spread so much trauma just because he forgot what he did to himself. And if that isn't unhinged, we don't know what is.
But what emerged from the ashes was unstoppable.
Conquest. This guy's addition to this list has probably become even more of a given thing ever since the Season 3 finale dropped, but Conquest is without a doubt one of the most unhinged Viltrumites in existence. He got his name because he's so good at subjugating other people, and apart from a handful of people, he's unparalleled among Viltrumites when it comes to strength. By his own admission, his people are scared of him, and we can't imagine how crazy you have to be to scare a Viltrumite. Or maybe we do, because Conquest didn't even lift a finger to fight Mark unless he himself himself was bleeding. Once he did, he didn't stop until he'd had his fill, and we think he was being serious when he said he wants to eat Mark and Oliver's hearts. Conquest's little speech about loneliness might reveal why he does what he does, but it doesn't excuse the fact that he does it. He kills because he wants to, because it's the only thing he's excellent at, and that's a truth several alien planets are intimately aware of. Conquest's 2 battles with Mark and his willingness to savor them both despite his own life being at risk just goes to show you he's got more than a few loose screws, and we're pretty sure we'd be here all day if we started going through his body count of victims. Still, as bad as he is, at least his sentiments give him something humanizing to redeem his character. These next few entries don't even have that going for them.
My word, how is this possible?
Dinosaurus. David Ayers is a man who transforms into an anthropomorphic T-Rex when he feels completely indifferent about things that would otherwise horrify people, and that alone should tell you his capacity for committing atrocities. In the comics, Dinosaurus engineers 2 massive public disasters, and the fact that he justifies them by using the big picture argument is why he's on this list. The first disaster is him leveling Las Vegas and turning it into a gigantic solar panel. Dino argues that the sacrifice of a few million people living in the sin capital of the world was worth it if the solar energy generated by it could make the lives of hundreds of millions of people better, and in the end, he was proven right. But that's because the United States government literally had no other option on their hands. Dinosaurus forced them to make the best out of one of the worst situations they'd ever faced, and Mark, naive as he was, took that to mean that Dino must be right. He realized how wrong he was when David unleashed the second disaster upon the world, which was blowing up Greenland. By doing that, he started a great flood that would have leveled Earth's population had Robot not built an artificial moon in time, but that didn't save the thousands that had already died because of the explosion. Dino also thought him killing a clone of Mark to clear his name from what he's done was a good idea, but when the real Mark made him see the folly of his actions, all he asked for was to be killed in return. Dinosaurus might have gone out the right way and shown Mark the maturity he lacked to be a decision maker, but that came at the cost of 1 million lives just from his final scheme. And the fact that David turns into Dino when he's feeling particularly indifferent, well, to us, that's just crazy. On. This guy might not get the kind of screen time Hi Dad gets, but even in that limited space, Onan proves that he's Thrag's son, alright? He's one of the most ruthless of all of Thrag's offspring, and that's reflected in the fact that he gets most of Thrag's attention. Sure, the Grand Regent doesn't exactly praise him all the time, but he does favor Onan over the rest for being a twin, and following in his own merciless footsteps. The moment that solidifies Onan as an unhinged psychopath is when he chases down Mark's daughter Tara and tries to kill her, when his mission is to kill Mark instead. After going through a crazy sequence of events that alienates him from his family for 5 years, Mark Grayson returns home intent on making things right. He retires to an isolated planet with Alan's help, but is attacked by Thrag's twins. Ursal goes after Adam Eve, who is just powerful enough to fend off her attacks, but Onan goes after Tara, wanting to kill her for being an inferior half-breed. He chases her and Mark across the planet easily, because Mark flies slower to keep his daughter alive. Onan is not a match for Invincible in terms of strength, but then he isn't trying to kill him first. In the end, he dies by Mark's hand in a vengeful gesture, which could have gone the opposite direction had he not toyed with Invincible and Tara for too long. We can honestly say that Ursal was kind of relieved by her brother's death because she says as much, but he isn't as bad as their dad is, honestly. This brings us to the final 2 entries for our list. Thrag. We think it's safe to say that any man who conquers a planet and breeds with all of its available women to create an army of his own is off the rocker. So Thrag being number 2 makes a whole lot of sense from that perspective. But the only reason he isn't number 1 is because there's one thing above killing in his list of priorities, and that's ensuring the survival of the Viltrum Empire as he sees fit. Thrag has dedicated millennia of his life guiding his people safely through one of the worst periods in their civilization. With about 50 people left under his command, Thrag had to be smart about deploying them and conserving their strength at the same time. There have been moments in the series where he has prioritized diplomacy and negotiation over killing people, because it just favors his strategy a lot better. Otherwise, you best believe he was going to decapitate Mark and Nolan after taking care of Nolan during the Viltrumite War. It's once he loses control of the Viltrumites that his bloodlust starts taking over his character, and by the final arc of the series, it has consumed him entirely. When Thrag Thrag fathers his brood of children. He has them import Ragnar to his home base so he can train them in how to kill the only things that can hunt a Viltrumite. Thrag also ends up using the Ragnar as attack dogs in his final battle with the Coalition, but it's his treatment of his children during that fight and his previous battle with Battle Beast that serve as reminders of his ruthless nature. We'll address the latter soon enough, so let's talk about the former, because it is just as pivotal of a point. During the last conflict between the Coalition of Planets and Thrag's Viltrum Empire, there comes a point where the Coalition starts riding roughshod over Thrag's forces, so he decides to start using his kids as weapons, and kills many of them while trying to kill Mark. Mark is forced to fly him into the sun just to get him to stop killing his kids, and this is the moment that truly reveals just how much Thrag holds himself back at all times. If he wanted to, he could be just as unhinged as Conquest and slaughter every damn thing in sight, but because he's a leader, he keeps it all contained until he snaps. When he snaps, he goes radio rental on his enemies, and only the flesh-melting heat of a star can stop him from killing you. Thrag was about to pop Terra's head like a cherry when he first met her, while telling her to not be afraid of her fate because it was a waste. He is behind the deaths of billions of sentient creatures across the universe, and his only regret is that he couldn't keep doing it forever. As bad as that is, we've just mentioned our reasons for putting number 2, so let's talk about number 1 now. Battle Beast. When it comes to characters who crave bloodshed, there is no one in Invincible that we can place above Battle Beast. Thok used to be a warrior who fought to liberate his home world from the yoke of subjugation. While he achieved that goal and ascended to legendary status because of it, it turned him into an addict for the field, so much so that he is only remembered as Battle Beast even amongst his own people. The first time we see him in Invincible, he's part of Machine Head's Little Sinister Six knockoff, but he quickly established himself as the Alpha by punking Mark into submission. Battle Beast then goes on to get captured by the Viltrumites and put in a prison ship shared by Nolan and Alan. During the pair's jailbreak, Battle Beast becomes lost in space while fighting a Viltrumite by himself, and we see the results of that battle at the end of Season 3, Episode 8. Not only did Battle Beast tear him apart, he managed to somehow survive the vacuum of space. In the comics, Beast becomes one of the central attractions of the Coalition's efforts against Thrag, and speaking of Thrag, that man becomes Thok's piece de resistance. From issue 115 to issue 120, Kirkman depicts a bloody and gruesome war between two men who represent the pinnacle of that concept in their respective civilizations. Battle Beast and Thrag fight each other for several weeks, and Thok even disembowels himself to even the playing field with his glorious target. When you can manage to knock Thrag off his game with your lunacy, you've won the target for craziest Invincible character in our books, and Thok did more than that. Every punch Thrag landed on him was a punch he welcomed, because this was his final fight. He was going to savor every ounce of agony and die a worthy death, which he does, but not before leaving the Grand Regent in the worst state we've seen him in. The universe is lucky that Battle Beast isn't a genocidal maniac, and prefers one-on-one combat with those he deems to be the strongest. Otherwise, there would be fewer planets in the Coalition, and he might just have accepted Thrag's offer to join forces. Because he didn't, and because he made the ultimate Viltrumite question what he'd gotten himself into, Battle Beast is at the top of our list, and we can't wait to read more about his journey with the new comic series coming out soon. Marvelous verdict. Having said that, we hope you guys enjoyed this video, because that's all we've got. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Invincible content. We will see you guys in the next one. Until then, stay out of sight of these 10 people at all costs, unless death is what you're in the mood for, that is.